customer service, done right, can be your company's single biggest competitive advantage. Welcome to the Customer Service Revolution. Join customer service authority and best-selling author John DiJulius as he interviews leaders who are revolutionizing their industries. This is more than a podcast, though. It's a movement. The Customer Service Revolution is a radical overthrow of conventional business mentality designed to transform what customers and employees experience. If you're a revolutionary customer service leader who's ready to stop competing on price and obsessed with building a brand that people cannot live without, this podcast is for you. Welcome to the Customer Service Revolution podcast with John DiJulius. This week, John talks with Ken Falke about his newest book, Lead Well: 10 Steps to Successful and Sustainable Leadership. As a former member of the U.S. Navy, serial entrepreneur, and current chairman and founder of the Boulder Crest Foundation, Ken has learned the key disciplines that make a great leader. Number 1 is to lead yourself first. Number 2 is to set and clearly communicate your vision. To hear the full 10 steps, listen in as Ken shares them with John, along with other leadership lessons in this episode. Now here's your host, John DiJulius.
Welcome, revolutionaries. This is John DiJulius, Chief Revolution Officer of the DiJulius Group. And welcome to another episode of the Customer Service Revolution podcast. I'm so excited today to be bringing back a former guest who has just written his second book, and it came out actually yesterday, December 14th, Mr. Ken Falke. Ken, welcome.
Hey, John, how are you today?
I am so excited to have you because I think your new book is so timely. So, last time, Ken, in episode 37, we talked about your first book, Struggle Well, bestseller. Struggle Well is about thriving in the aftermath of trauma. And, you have this amazing history from military, 21 years in the Navy, Master Chief Petty Officer. Then you went on to become a serial entrepreneur, growing multiple businesses and selling them. And now you run Boulder Crest, which is an amazing not-for-profit organization. Explain that, because I want to do it justice.
Yeah, well, I appreciate the intro, John. Boulder Crest is basically, we own 2 retreat centers where we help men and women who've worn uniforms, military, first responders primarily. And I say first responders in a general category. It's law enforcement, firefighters, men and women who are suffering with post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, anxiety. And we have a non-traditional approach to, helping them through this trauma. And the non-traditional approach is a training approach where we teach men and women the science of something called post-traumatic growth, which basically at the highest level means, what doesn't kill us makes us stronger, and how do we learn from these traumatic events to become a better version of ourselves, and really to help people change their perspective rather than looking at life negatively, is to look at life in a very positive manner. And that in itself sometimes can make or break the way we get out of bed every day.
And it's amazing. I've been a part of it on the advisory committee, a consultant. I've been to at least 2 of your locations. How many locations do you have, Ken?
We have 2, one in Arizona, one in Virginia.
And it's just amazing what your team is about. I mean, talk about world-class experience and what you do for these men and women, which is great. But today we're here to talk about your new book, Lead Well, that came out yesterday, December 14th. And Lead Well is about 10 steps to successful and sustainable leadership. So I'm excited to talk about this. I think it's so apropos. So if you didn't hear our first interview, episode 37 was about Ken's last book, How to Survive If You've Had Any Type of PTSD. And you've turned that into post-traumatic growth, which is key. And, it's funny, Ken, maybe before this, before the pandemic, when I would hear maybe a title about something to do with PTSD, I'd be like, well, that's good for people in the military or, first responders, but that's not something the everyday Joe needs. And I think one of the positive side effects very few, from the pandemic is how it's really brought mental health to the forefront. And I don't believe it has a negative stigma anymore. Would you agree with that?
I think so. I think we work hard. The nation's worked hard at normalizing trauma. I do think there's still a stigma. I think, especially I'll say with men, I think that a lot of men just don't want to admit that anything's wrong with their head. Women tend to, talk more and be open more to hearing others. And I just think with men, there's this sense that the strength that we are supposed to show isn't there when you say something's wrong. So, I don't know that we'll ever get completely rid of the stigma, but I do think there's a lot of initiatives going around, and it's a lot better today than it was certainly 20 years ago.
Yeah. We started working with police departments of all industries the past 2 years. And, talking to them that, they have wellness counselors on site, but they say they struggle because, like you just said, some men don't want to be seen walking into that office. They may want to go into the office. They just don't want to be seen going into it by their coworkers. So it's definitely, but I do think that this has helped. It's allowed people to raise their hand and say, I need help. And so that's why I love the timing of your book, because I believe in leadership today with the great resignation. That great resignation, I hate the word labor shortage. I don't buy it. I don't think there's a labor shortage. I think there's a turnover crisis. And the reason being is that, there's new skill sets that leaders never had to be as worried about before. And one of them is leading from a distance, right? With a large percentage of working from home. But the other one, which, I love what you write on and talk about, is that we have to be concerned with, our own and our employees and our families' mental wellness. And that was never anything in colleges, master degrees, many of us were taught. And I could just hear leaders saying, I didn't become a leader, a boss to be someone's therapist, right? But that's why we're seeing the great resignation.
Yeah. It's funny you said that, because I had a friend the other day, like 2 weeks ago, maybe he was like, I just don't understand why my people bring all their family bullshit into my company. And I'm like, dude, they're people, right? I mean, how can you can't turn life off and on, and I mean, the cell phone, I mean, what has it done? I mean, we're connected all the time. I mean, and I know you've taught me everything I know about customer service, but you can't even go into a restaurant nowadays, and the young girls and guys that are standing at the hostess table when you walk in, they're behind there, looking down at their phone, texting somebody. And it's like, it's, hoping that nobody sees them, but everybody sees them. And it's just, how do you turn that off? I mean, you're not only anymore, it's, well, I got an argument this morning before I left work with my wife, and now I'm at work and I'm a little bit, pissed off or in a bad mood. But now it's like all day long that you're connected to this crazy network of life that is not just, your family problems.
And to your point, Ken, we can complain about it as leaders and as the grumpy old men, get off my lawn, and these kids are, but it's a reality. It's not going away. Just like the work from home quandary has totally has erased the line between personal, home, and work. Now they're all the same thing. And, I even talk about something that I can't even figure out. What I realized is our commute time, to and from work or to and from the airport, while it was frustrating and we all loved when we didn't have to do it anymore, it was like we got a 25th hour in a day. I then realized it served a purpose, right? You have a stressful day, whatever you went through. Now you got, 30 to 45 minutes to drive home, listen to sports talk radio, call a buddy, shoot the shit, and then you walk in and you can take off the one cape and put on the other. Well, now our commute is opening our office door, stepping in the kitchen, and that's hard, right? That's hard. So, all right, let's get to it. So lead well, and we have a link to it, 10 steps to successful and sustainable leadership. Before you explain it, or as you explain it, tell us how it's different from your first book, Struggle Well.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, Struggle Well was really a book that was designed to teach people what we're learning here at Boulder Crest, which is primarily that in the aftermath of trauma, if you do certain things well, you can really blossom from those experiences. And let's think of it maybe, for lack of a better word right now, think of it as kind of a wellness book. How do you take care of yourself? The concept of lead well is similar in chapter 1, where we talk about this whole idea of leading yourself first, but it's really what the people that you work with and who work for you and work around you and what they expect and how to help manage that. And I think there's a lot of things changing in the world, but I think the basic principles, and that's what we say in this Lead Well book, is that these are timeless principles of leadership and things that I think we've just tried to complicate the science of leadership way too much. And that's why I just wanted to bring it back to, it's a short book. It's only 110 pages, I think. And it's an easy read, but it's really to really ground ourselves again and to see some examples of what right looks like. And I think that's really what I'm hoping people will take away from the book.
Well, Ken, I was thinking about this right before our call, is I can't think, and this isn't me blowing smoke, I can't think of a person more qualified to write the book because of your background, right? You led men and women in the military. Then you led hundreds and hundreds of employees in your your successful entrepreneur careers, building businesses. Your toughest leadership is you've been a husband, a father, and a grandfather, right? And there's only one thing I think is missing from this perfect leadership resume, and you haven't coached a major sports team. I think that's the only thing. If I had to poke a hole, because you've done it all, and you've done it well. So I know you have a favorite quote on what leadership is.
I do. And I just want to correct you because I don't know if you remember, I left high school to play professional hockey.
Oh, that's right. Did you coach?
Well, hold on. My career did not work out for me. But when I ended up enlisted in the Navy, one of the first places I was ever stationed was in Scotland, and I coached and captained an exhibition hockey team that traveled all over the United Kingdom playing hockey. So, although it wasn't a major league team,
no, you got it all. I left out the nonprofit, which has its own.
Yeah, no, it's been a great journey, and it is great because I keep getting to learn, all the failures I made as a father, I'm trying to correct as a grandfather, all the failures.
You've seen so many different leaders, and I've worked and still work with some of the most amazing business leaders in the world, from Chick-fil-A and Starbucks and the Ritz-Carlton, but I don't know anyone that has, the resume that you have in so many different lives that this book is amazing because you have collected and earned all this knowledge.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Well, let me get back to the point that you asked me, which was my favorite quote. So if you Google, definition of leadership, there's thousands of definitions of leadership. And it's funny because I say this in the book too, even in the military where you have 4 services, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, if you look at the doctrine and the military does a great job of defining things, the definitions of leadership in each of the 4 services is not the same. So, which I find even a little bit common. When I sold my first company, John, I took a year off and I went and did a master's degree. I was an enlisted guy in the Navy. I never went to college. I earned my undergraduate degree through night school. I did a 1 year, kind of sabbatical at Georgetown University and did a master's degree there. And one of the books I read was called The Cathedral Within. As you know, Georgetown's a Jesuit school. It's an amazing educational facility. And one of the things in that book that I really love the most, the author, by the way, is a guy named Bill Shore, was that he defined leadership as helping people get to a place that they can't get to on their own. And to me, that's really what it's all about. And I think of your FORD acronym, which we use and teach at Boulder Crest a lot. But it's this whole concept of understanding people's dreams, because as a leader, right, the D in FORD is, if I understand your dreams as a leader, then I can help you get there. And I think that's what Bill Shore was saying, is that I can't get up every day. I tell people all the time, leadership itself, I think Webster's Dictionary's got it wrong. It's a verb. It's a contact sport. You've got to do stuff. You just can't have a title. You just can't have a nice big corner office. You've got to get up and be engaged with the people that you work for. And I think that's really what people love. They love that leader that's helping them get to the next phase of their career. And that's
right. And it's not about, you getting me to go where you want me to go, right? It's about you getting me to want to go in the same direction. I see what's in it for all. And I love that. And for those of you who may not be familiar, I'm sure most of you are, FORD stands for Family, Occupation, Recreation, and Dreams. All right, so you have the Lead Well 10, and give us a little, and then I'm going to dive into, I'll list all of them, and they're also listed in the show notes. But tell us how you came up with these 10. What do these 10 represent?
Well, John, for years, I guess really probably for 20 years now, I've been asked to speak at various leadership conferences. I go back to Georgetown every year and speak to an academic leadership class. And, I spent a lot of time, as mentioned, 21 years in the Navy and another 20 years now in the business world. And the first 20 years of my life, working for different places, people, and being a part of a family that had great leaders and bad leaders. And you learn a lot. And I finally got to the point, I think, academically, where I thought, I got to document this. There's no sophisticated research here. It's just my belief on what people want and why they stick with you. At AT Solutions, my first company, we had over 500 employees, and our turnover rate was about 6%. And out of that 6%, or 4% of the total number, was in fact administrative hires, real transient types of work, bookkeepers, HR professionals, people that, don't want to be in the same job for years. They have opportunities to grow, but not necessarily in our company. So they go other places as they learn more, which I'm always a big fan of and support. But at the end of the day, in the industry that I was in, primarily government contracting, where the average turnover rate's almost 30%. And to me, I just felt that, I didn't want to pat myself on the back, but I thought, I've heard it, and I've heard it over and over again over the years. Man, you're a great guy to work for. We love coming to work in the morning, And I thought, well, if that's the case and it's true, I hope nobody's blowing smoke. I need to analyze it. And that's really what I did. And I distilled what I thought was my philosophy into 10 completely separate line items of the way that I get up every morning to work. And I used to call it, when I was in a speaker mode, if you will, Ken's 10. And really, as I looked at it more and more, it really wasn't my 10. It was 10 things that I had learned from the worst leaders in the world, some mediocre leaders, and a handful of great leaders. And that's really what I wanted to document.
Yeah, Ken, listen, for knowing you and reading the book, you didn't invent the 10, you just codified it. And it's kind of like what I came up with in my books is working with the best customer and employee experience companies in the world. I started finding what the best had in common, right? I didn't invent it, but I was able to codify it. And that's what you've done, which I really, really love. So the 10, I'm going to go through the 10 really quick, and then we're going to go back. And again, both the link to order Ken's book is in the show notes, as well as these 10. The first one, number one, lead well. Number one is lead yourself first. Number two, set and clearly communicate your vision. Number three, set and achieve goals that align with your vision. Number four, listen well. Number five, lead with kindness. Number six, hire quality people. Number seven, create a culture of loyalty and satisfaction. Number eight, hold yourself and others accountable. Number nine, lead with courage. And number 10, give back. And I love these. I think when you first hear them, before I got into each chapter, it's like, yeah, come on, I know these. It's like, brush your teeth, eat well, and, exercise, and you'll live a good life. But while we've heard it before, you say it in a completely different way, which I love. It's also not only for the quote unquote leader, of a business. You could be a parent. You could be, serving your church, community, kids, whatever that may be, friends. But you also get in and make it a lot more black and white and accountable. And to me, this is almost should be a list that you grade yourself on constantly, because, while, I know this list, when I'm not living the best version of myself, which is a lot more than I like to admit, having this list, I can go to right away and see where I'm deficient and where I need to get back to it. So, Ken, let's start with, I love number one, lead yourself first. It's like the first time I ever heard them say, put your own mask on before helping others sounded almost selfish, right? But you're worthless to everyone else if you don't take care of yourself first.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's leadership 101. When maybe it's followership 101. Is that I want to follow somebody who's a role model, and that's I think really what leadership's about. We've looked over the years, we've looked at these corporate mentorship programs, and I was talking to somebody one time at Bristol Myers Squibb, and she said to me, none of these damn mentorship programs work. And I said, of course they don't. You can't assign people mentors. People are most successful when they pick somebody that is most like what they want to be. And how do you match, Match.com, that philosophy? It's just impossible, really. And really, that's my whole point, is that leaders have to be this role model, and you can't be a leader that says, do as I say and not as I do. You can't tell people to live a healthy life if you're not. You can't tell people not to sleep around on their families if you are. I mean, it's all those things
right.
that are just, they're not congruent. And that's really what leading yourself's all about. And for those that haven't read Struggle Well, if you go back and look at the wellness model in Struggle Well, we referenced that in this chapter, but that's what I'm talking about in mind and body and spirituality and financial wellness, to create this system around you that says, okay, no, I'm not perfect. No, nobody is, no leader is, but I'm in a place where I feel very strongly that every morning I can get up and be and show up as the best version of myself and inspire people to follow me.
And I really like it. You talk about in this chapter, the mind, the body, finances, spirituality, building the habit of self-awareness, which is so much harder to do. And it takes practice, right? It's not something that, you visit once and walk away from it. It has to be created in daily habits.
Like I said, if you want to be a great leader, you have got to get up every day and show up as the best version of yourself. And it's not easy. And that's why not everybody does it. And I believe, the best leaders, I think, John, we were talking a little bit before we got on the recording. There was an Axios survey that came out last year, about a month into COVID, and it said 70% of Americans hate their jobs. And my real belief, what people are saying, is it's not the jobs they hate, it's the people that they work with that they hate, and the people that they work for that they hate. And that's really what I think, like you said, it's not a job shortage, it's a turnover crisis. It's like this whole concept that people want to be around great people and alike people. And that's what I believe leading yourself is first, is to create this role model that inspires people, magnetically inspires people to be around you and to be a part of your transformation.
And I heard the late, great Jimmy V, speak, 30 years ago, at least. And I remember something that he said. He goes, I don't motivate anyone other than James Anthony Thomas Valvano. He goes, that's a 24/7, 365-day job. He goes, I'm not sitting there saying, hey, what's wrong with you? Why aren't you motivated? You. He goes, I worry about myself. And, when I'm on and, all of a sudden the people around me seem to be more on. So I love that. Hey, let's go to lead wealth. Number 3, set and achieve goals that align with your vision. So how can we not? Like, give me an example of where we could be not doing that.
Well, I think, John, one of the things that is consistent throughout successful people is that successful people set lots and lots of short-term goals. They understand that the short-term success is what leads to long-term success. And, it's hard for any of us. None of us have a crystal ball. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. So, setting these short-term goals and being in charge of what's going to happen tomorrow is really what short-term goal setting is all about. Rather than living this proverbial tail wagging the dog, which where most people are. Most people don't set goals. Most people get up every day and life shakes them.
So give me an example of maybe a wrong goal or not the one we should be focused on. Is it saying, I want to build a $10 million company? I want to run a marathon? Is that where you mean, like, instead say, I want to grow my business X% this year, or, I want to first run 3 miles a day and get it up to 5 and get it up to 7. Is that kind of where you mean the short term?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. I think your marathon analogy is right on. The company, the way I run my business, and we talk about this in the book, is we do a strategic planning process. We look out at where we want to be in 3 years, but we don't focus on years 2 and 3. We focus on year 1 to start to get us in that movement. And that's really that marathon analogy is, okay, I want to run a marathon. It may take me a year, but the way to do that, just Google how to run a marathon, is today I'm going to run a mile. By the end of the second or third month, I'm running 5 miles a day, and then I'm running 13 and 20. And finally I can get through that wall and break that 26 miles. So I think that's,
and even to that point, I love the marathon idea, because I've trained for a couple, and where I had to change my mindset was when I would be running and I'd be like, all right, I got 2 down, 24 more to go, right? Or if I was just out there, in my long runs, 12 more to go or 15 more to go, whatever it was, I get really discouraged. But when I focused on the micro and said, all right, in my 3rd mile, I want my time to be this, right? All of a sudden, the miles accumulate. But when you're looking at how far you are away from your goal, that can get discouraging.
It's very frustrating.
Yeah.
And that's why I believe not a lot of people set goals. And even the ones that start setting them, when they find that level of frustration and it becomes a setback, the easiest thing to do is say, screw it. I'm not going to set any more goals. I'm just going to get up and let life, take me.
You can't fail if you don't set goals.
That's right. That's right.
Hey, I jumped over to it. I'm looking through my book, and I highlighted so many things too. And set, lead well. Number 2, set and clearly communicate your vision, and especially with the leading from a distance, new tool that we all have to have at our belt. I think this is so important that we have to teach employees their part in where we're going, the impact that they have, and rally them around. The purpose for employees, and this is where I think most companies and leaders get it wrong. The purpose for employees, the currency for employees is purpose. And, I think you really outline this well in the 2nd chapter of Set, Clearly Communicate Your Vision. Share some best practices from that.
Well, you're right. You're spot on, I think, with that comment. But how many companies, John, have you been in where, you walk through the entranceway and there's this mission and vision statement and, all this stuff, but nobody really understands it, and what it is and where it's at. And that's what I think go back to the marathon analogy. My analogy with setting visions is kind of like MapQuest and or Google Maps or whatever you use on your navigation. But it's like you want to get somewhere, you've got to set the address in there so that you can get from point A to point B. And I think when people know that, then you start to get on this plan. And somewhere along that plan, there might be a detour because there's an accident or the road's being worked on or something. But at the end of the day, when everybody fully understands that vision and
your North Star, right? Your North Star.
Your North Star. It's where you're going, right? And then you've got this whole concept of, we jumped to 3, which was the goals, is that once I know my vision, then the next thing to do is set the steps and where do I go? What are my waypoints? How do I get there? What am I got to do to get there? So that really is the basis, I think, of every company. And although that often starts from the top, one of the things you really need in that, mission and vision establishment is buy-in. That's really important because that's one of the reasons a lot of these companies and bad leadership occurs and doesn't work well is because people set this and say, all right, here, it's my way or the highway. And none of us know everything. And that's why I think it's good to have, leadership teams working together to build these statements and then to go out and share them throughout the community. And I think this stuff, in the best of companies, you mentioned places like Chick-fil-A. I mean, you go into Chick-fil-A, every single Chick-fil-A pretty much looks the same. Not just looks, but I mean, operates, acts, right. People behave. That's because there's clarity. There's clarity in the vision. There's clarity in the franchise model, the expansion, the training, and all of that stuff. So I don't think, a lot of people, when I talk about, this stuff, they say, oh, that works well in small companies. But I'm like, no, this works well at any scale as long as you make it clear.
Well, how about the greatest example ever? The military, right? I'm not going into it because I'm going to get rich, right? What you're asking me to do is kind of absurd and, dangerous and, versus sitting back in Cleveland in a cozy chair in a warm place where, I don't know, the worst thing that could happen to me is, something trivial. But military get young men and women to make the ultimate sacrifice. And so I really like this, your lead well number 2, set and clearly communicate your vision, for a lot of reasons, even with communicating it with people who don't realize. So it might be the warehouse guy who's packaging the orders, and they need to understand the impact that they have on the goals and the vision and all that. So I love that.
John, I got to say, just because you use that analogy, I was with somebody the other day, and I think I had heard this somewhere along my career, but I guess there was this like super famous incident that occurred, and don't quote me on the company. I want to say it was Jack Welch, and I want to say it was at General Electric. And he was walking the floor, and he said, Jack Welch, or whoever the leader was, said to this janitor, a guy that was cleaning the floor, he said, how you doing today? And he said, can I ask you, what your job is here at the company? And I think it was a General Electric facility that was building appliances. And he said, my job here is to ensure that the appliances are built, But the bottom line was that this guy knew that although his task was to keep the building clean, the mission and the vision of the business unit he worked in was really about making sure those appliances were properly built and put on trucks and sent out. And I think that, to me, is what great leadership's all about.
Well, Ken, you did it. I mean, I wrote about this in one of my books, your company, one of your earlier companies, AT Solutions, right? Which explained in a high level what AT Solutions did, an anti-terrorist training organization, correct?
No.
I just want to make sure I said it right. And if I'm a receptionist or an educator for AT Solutions, maybe not it's the most sexiest thing, but I remember when we worked with your leadership team and your employees, it became about bringing sons and daughters and fathers and mothers home to their family, right? That has a completely different spin than I need to book a trainer to go out to wherever. That's not my role. My role is to help bring loved ones home to their families.
That's right. That was the basis of what we communicated. That it was clear that, the mission of AT Solutions wasn't to provide training courses. It was to send men and women to war and to make sure they came home from war alive. And we did a damn good job at that. And that's my mission, is that how do we ensure that these visions and these mission statements aren't just some words up on a wall? And I tell you, it's just motivating. Nothing's worse than coming to work and not knowing why you're there, right?
Right.
And so many people are in those types of jobs.
You're listening to the Customer Service Revolution podcast. You've probably read all of John's books, so you're obviously passionate about the customer experience. Have you ever considered a career as a customer experience coach? The DiJulius Group can train and license you in the same methodology that our consultants use. It's the same framework that's being used in companies like Starbucks, Chick-fil-A, Nestle, and the Ritz-Carltons. Our Coach Camp gives you the tools to start your own business as a CX coach. If you're ready to invest in your future and build a business around your passion for the customer experience, contact Claudia at thedijuliusgroup.com or visit cxcoaching.com.
All right, let's go to lead well number 5. It's lead with kindness. And I believe kindness and empathy are our greatest superpower if we use it. And I think kindness, like the word love in business, was kind of taboo 10, 15, 30 years ago. And I really believe the ones that are embracing this. So let's talk about kindness as a leader.
Well, it's I give some examples in the book about kindness. People think of military leaders as screamers and yellers, and by the way, many of them are. But at the end of the day, I had a couple that guys back to back, actually a chief and a young lieutenant, and the young lieutenant's motto was "Kill them with kindness," and I just believe it goes a long way. I mean, I've never met anybody, and I know there's some sadistic people in this world, but I've personally have never met anybody that likes being screamed at, who likes working with, one of the books I made my management team read at AT Solutions is a high quality business book with a hilarious title called The No Asshole Rule. And it talks about how one bad person in any size of an organization can destroy it. And kindness just overrides that, and that's really what you do. I mean, it's, I hate to jump ahead of you, but lead well number 6 is this whole concept of hiring quality people. And those things are what you want to look for in the hiring process. Is not just, can they do the job? Harvard Business School, where I studied an executive education program, has a philosophy of hire for attitude, train for skills. And there's not a skill in the world that can't be trained, but it is hard to take an adult who is not a nice person and make them kind.
100%. All the training in the world is not going to change that in you.
That's right. So, I mean, that's my point, is that, when you get this around you, you relieve your organizations of toxicity, and then people just start to flourish. And I think, again, that starts at the top. If you've got a screamer as a leader, I don't care how kind the people in the chain of command are, if you will, the organizational structure are, people, that leadership style is going to rub off on people, and it's not going to be good for an organization.
Speaking of the Harvard Business Review, several years ago, they came out with a great article called, I think it was called, "Are You a Bad Boss?" And then it went into what we all think of as a bad boss, right? The yeller, the screamer, the in your face. And they say today that's not the bad boss. The bad boss is kind of what so many of your lead well commandments are, is someone who doesn't inspire, someone who's not a role model, someone who isn't, recognizing, the positivity and demonstrating, all those things. That's a bad boss. God, I hope that we've ridded out the yeller and screamers, and I'm sure they still exist. But just because you don't, yell and get someone's face, or you still can be a bad boss, right? Without helping them become their best version. There's so many of these I love, and I wish we had more time. But hold yourself and others accountable. I think that's really, really important, because everything is talk until there's an accountability piece to it. So talk to us about that.
Well, I think what the chapter starts off by basically saying, the first thing we have to understand is the difference between responsibility and accountability. And I have a saying that most people who are looking to move up the ladder in corporate America, they want the responsibility, but they don't necessarily want the accountability, what goes with that. And accountability is always not negative either. I mean, there's positive and negative ways of influencing and rewarding, behaviors. But at the end of the day, when accountability doesn't occur in an organization, everybody sees that and then they want more of it. So because nobody wants to be accountable. I'll give you a story that happened in the military to me, and I talk about this in the book, so I don't want to give the whole book away, but at the end of the day, I think this is a really powerful example. I was an enlisted guy, a senior enlisted guy at a unit, and one of our commanding officers, I was at a headquarters unit, one of the commanding officers in one of our units was arrested for soliciting a prostitute on the streets of a major city in the United States. And my boss
So
came.
it wasn't Vegas.
No. My boss came to me the next day and he said, hey, Master Chief, what do we do with this guy? And I'm like, well, what do you mean, what do we do with him? He's got arrested, he can't go back and lead men, because if we don't hold him accountable for his behavior and his actions, everybody's going to think they can get away with that. Anyway, the response from my commanding officer was, well, if I brush it under the carpet, this guy will be fine and he can finish on with his career. And I'm like, well, does he deserve that? I mean, is this really what accountability in the Navy has come to? And sure enough, John, they brushed it under the carpet. This guy got promoted ultimately to Navy captain. In the Army, that would be a colonel, a full bird colonel. It's a pretty substantial rank in any military service. And people knew it. People knew about it. And then the next week, somebody goes and gets a DUI, and he's some young enlisted guy at the unit, and they end up throwing him out of the Navy because of his behavior. And those are the things that, the lack of that strategy, that congruency, the equality, all the lack of that always shows up in this accountability thing. And that's why I'm so focused on being a great example. Not perfect. I've made as many mistakes as the next guy, but every day, to get up and to hold yourself accountable for what you said you're going to do. I remember my brother, who, by the way, said to say hi to you. He introduced us.
Yes, yes.
My younger brother, Mike, I remember him, he ran a construction business, and on the back of his card, the tagline was, "We do what we say we're going to do." And I used to love that because it was so simple, but there's so many people in life that don't do that. And that's really what this is all about.
No, I love the accountability. Not to go down a really dark hole, but the lack of accountability is what happens, and how people like, Jeffrey Epstein or Harvey Weinstein get to where they've got. They didn't wake up at 50 and decide to do something bad. They've been doing, this stuff bad for years, but maybe because they were great at their job, there was no accountability, like you said. And then there's a lot of bad stuff along the way. And I think accountability is major internally.
And John, on top of that, the more you get away with something, the more that behavior becomes in your mind, becomes okay, becomes appropriate. Not necessarily appropriate, but it becomes okay. And you're right. Those are great examples, Epstein, Weinstein. And these are people who were never held accountable. And then once it caught up to them, then what? So, and the lack of that accountability just starts to make it seem like it's okay.
I use the example, in my first business in salons, as silly as about being on time, right? I said, here's the thing, this, young, newer employee could be 3 months, 6 months, is panicked because something happened at home. And she's like, oh my God, I might be late. And she's rushing to work. And all of a sudden she walks in and she's 5 minutes late. No one says anything to her. Well, all of a sudden, next week, she's not in such a hurry anymore because she's not held accountable. It's okay. And now we have a, tardiness problem or an attendance problem. And it can be as silly as that. And it's better to have less rules and stick to them than, a gazillion rules. There's so many good ones. Something I want to ask you, and you've kind of answered it, but I just want to get your, like I said in the opening, leadership's role in helping and recognizing employees with mental health issues. What does that look like today? Because that wasn't something that we were ever trained in school, or, a leader that trained us, taught us on, but it's a skill set we have to have today. 1 in 5 adults suffer from some type of mental illness, and that jumps up to 1 in 3 with people younger than 30. So to be a great leader at home or in the business world, we have to help and recognize. So what does that look like in Ken's opinion?
Yeah, well, I think we talk a little more about that concept in struggle well than we do lead well. But, if we go back to this whole concept that, great leaders have three qualities: a high level of technical expertise, a high level of intelligence, and a high level of emotional intelligence. I think the higher level our emotional intelligence is, empathy being one of 5 elements of emotional intelligence, probably the most important being self-aware, but that as we become more aware of ourselves and our surroundings, those things tend to stand out, and the concept of kindness and all of that adds into this equation of, am I looking out for other people? Am I willing to have those hard conversations? John, I commend you because of all the stuff you've done with the customer service side of things, but we probably should come up with a 5th letter to our Ford acronym, that talks about that. How do we, we want to know about your family, your occupation, your relationships, your dreams, but we also want to know how you are, and not just from a superfluous angle, but to have some depth to understand. Because I think I said it earlier, I had a friend a couple of weeks ago say something about people bringing their family problems to work. That's life, right? I mean, you just can't come to work and shut off life, especially now with cell phones. I mean, we're connected to the good and the bad and the ugly all day long. And as leaders, I think we have a responsibility to really understand, what's going on with the people that work for us. And again, some of you out there that are listening that might be running bigger companies, that I'm talking about your direct reports. But even when you're talking to people,
and making sure their direct reports are doing it to their employees.
Exactly right. Because if you do it to the people that are directly reporting to you, that will pass down through the organization. And asking those hard questions. When you ask somebody, how are they doing, stop. Don't let them just give you, oh yeah, I'm fine, or how are you? Or, turn around and ask them again. No,
and
really.
I love this. I also found out, surprisingly, it's about where in the conversation you ask that, right? So when we got on a call today, or we bump into each other, or whatever the interaction is, hey, Ken, how you doing? And that's going to be more of a generic transition, great, under the weather, but very brief. I learned something that I'm trying to do more, especially with my employees. But I had a client reach out to me a couple months ago, and he lives in Cleveland. He says, hey, I just really want to pick your brain. Is there any chance I could buy lunch, coffee? I said, just come into the office. So he comes in the office. Hey, how you doing? Great. How you doing? Great. We sit down. We're talking about a bunch of stuff. And I don't know, this is so unlike me until this happened. But halfway, he must have given me something. I said, let me ask you, how are you really doing? And Ken, he started crying. Then I was like, freaking, I didn't know what to do then, right? But it really taught me where you ask that question. So now I try, when I'm talking to friends or employees on a Zoom call, whatever that is towards the end, after we got all the stuff done, is to say, Ken, let me ask you something. How you really doing? How's everything going? And that is such a more sincere question that may prompt a authentic response than just the typical, hey, Ken, how you doing? Let's get after it. So I love that.
No, I think it's exactly what you have to do, and be prepared for that too. And that's how that emotional intelligence really starts to present and get stronger in your leadership skills, is when that first person cries and you go home at night and you're like, damn, you kind of got 2 choices. Am I going to ask that question again?
Right.
Or
right. It was just a rhetorical question. I really didn't want to know.
Or I think the great leader says, I got to be prepared for that, because people aren't well. I mean, it's worse today, I think, than it's ever been. But it's at the end of the day, people carry a lot of stuff around, and I think we owe it to them as leaders to make sure that we are sincerely concerned about their well-being.
I love this book, Ken. It's going to be your 2nd bestseller. I'm the first to predict it. If it already isn't, it's been out for about 24 hours. Lead Well, 10 Steps to Successful and Sustainable Leadership. but I could take the word leadership. It's the way, we should be friends to each other, right? Siblings to each other, every area of your life. I love that you just brought so much wealth of knowledge and experience from the military, from the nonprofit sector, from the business world. Like you said, people you had amazing leaders in your life, personally and professionally, and not so amazing, and you were able to kind of codify this list of Lead Well 10. It's fantastic. I can't thank you enough. I know you personally, and you walk the talk in every aspect. I feel very fortunate to have known you. It's got to be 20 years and call you a friend. So thanks so much, Ken.
Thank you, John. I really appreciate it. Keep up the great work, and thanks for having me on as a guest today.
Awesome. Thank you, Revolutionaries, for another episode of the Customer Service Revolution podcast. We will see you next week.
You are the reason we launched the Customer Service Revolution podcast, so we hope you're enjoying it. Please give us a review, let us know what you think. Even a simple thumbs up click lets us know if we're on the right track. Be sure to subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to podcasts to be sure you get every episode. Thanks for listening and for being part of the Customer Service Revolution.